Hello, Delt Nation. Vince Russo here once again. It is 9:09 a.m. Eastern Time, and so far we are off and running with almost $29,000 raised and 113 gifts in the door. That is your update thus far. Still a lot of awesome things coming. In just a moment, we'll have our first guest of the day. I want to give a shout out to Andy Longo. We saw your comment earlier. Missed you on the first go around, but wanted to make sure we gave you a shout out. Also, thank you so much for your generous gift to the Military Delts Fund. We know that those guys really appreciate the support. So continue to feel free to comment. We're here live on Facebook and on YouTube. We see the comments. We're happy to interact. Should be a really fun day so far, off and running, like I said. Working towards that 1858 challenge. When we get to 185, we're at 113 right now, but 185 donations in the door will unlock an additional almost $2,000 to the tune of 1,858 to celebrate the founding of our fraternity. Just a reminder, at 11:30, I will be live with International President Steve Paquette. But in the interim, I am super happy to be joined by the fraternity's Director of Assessment and a dear friend of mine, Ken Tubbs, a graduate from the Iota chapter at John Carroll University. And we'll bring in Ken right now. Ken, how are you?
Morning, Vince. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Ken, tell me, I gotta let everyone know. So, one of your nicknames is Rusty. Where does that derive from?
So some people know that as my nickname. It's a not so secret in the fraternity. When I was a young man, my father thought it'd be funny to name me Rusty. So with a last name like Tubbs, his thought being Rusty Tubbs would be quite a name. I always think of it would have been a perfect NASCAR name if I were a driver. But lo and behold, my mom put the caboot on that, and Ken was the name.
Very cool. Very cool. I know we're going to talk a lot about data and tracking some things and trends within the fraternity, but tell me, on a very surface level, what pulled you into Delta Tau Delta at John Carroll, and what's kept you so passionate about the organization years later?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a first generation college student. I'm very proud of that. But I also went to school 2 hours away from my hometown. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, went to school at John Carroll University in Cleveland, Ohio. And when I went to school, I didn't know anybody. I really wasn't interested in fraternity at the time. John Carroll being a school of about 3,000 students, there really wasn't a lively Greek community. And also the national Greek community is only 10 years old at John Carroll at the time. They started in 2001 with national chapters coming over from local chapters. So there really wasn't this cultural phenomenon about joining a fraternity like there's at some of our larger institutions or some of our more ingrained private schools. But I was really interested in investing in wanting to do community service. I went to a Catholic high school. I went to John Carroll as a Jesuit school as a way for me to continue to give. That's always been something that's been important to me. And over the course of time in my first semester at Carroll, I was able to meet some men throughout some community service events that I really connected with. And we talked about everything under the sun, from how terrible the Browns were to family and friends and board games and video games and class and all this stuff. And never once did fraternity come up. And then one day, a few weeks into the first semester, I learned all these men were members of Delta Tau Delta. And that's when I got interested. I see these great men who I wanted to be with and be friends with. And so I started asking questions. And I think my interest in them and their interest in me ultimately led to me being asked to join. And from that point, I really had a great experience. I was chapter president. I was elected as director of risk manager as a freshman. So I felt a great weight of responsibility early on. I felt really honored by that. I went on to serve as IFC president, chapter consultant for a year. I was hired and worked for the fraternity out of that after graduation. And then when I returned and started my graduate program at Kent State University in higher ed, I became chapter advisor of my home chapter, and that was really special to me. But some of the things that really stuck out to me when I was in the chapter, we used to always play dodgeball on Friday nights. We always tried to have some sort of alternative programming to attract men who might not just be interested in going out and partying. So we would rent out the school gym and play dodgeball every Friday night. And that was at the time when Dodgeball the movie was a big hit. So we used to have the Patches O'Houlihan trophy. And so we used to have a lot of fun with that. We had brotherhood retreats every semester that really brought us close together. And then on a personal note, I was able to attend the Washington, D.C. Leadership Academy hosted by the foundation. Was able to meet Delts from all over the country, and it really opened my eyes to what the fraternity meant. And maybe the greatest personal experience I had as a member of the chapter was I grew really close to my chapter advisor, Mark Starr, who went on to serve as Northern Division president, and now is a really close friend and mentor to me. And so all of the things that the fraternity has brought me really helps build affinity for me and really continues to make me want to give back and help in any way I can.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Appreciate you sharing that. Already a couple comments coming through from some former Kai. Got Cody Durrell saying love that guy, and Jack Mattern saying hello. So a little bit of love for Ken this morning. Let's turn the attention to the director of assessment role, a relatively new role within the fraternity. Tell me, in layman's terms, for those out there, what does the director of assessment do?
Yeah. So the director of assessment, I guess in really, really simple terms, is I oversee any project that involves data collection, evaluation, or assessment of the fraternity. And so that can be really big projects, like we're talking about some larger scale assessment of our membership experience over the course of years, to really specific, small, quick historical information like, hey, Ken, what was the percentage of men in our first year class this year who went to Ignite? So even just doing little things like that. Some people like to refer to me as the numbers guy, but we also remember that there's qualitative assessment and quantitative assessment as part of that. Where really, I think for a lot of people, I've really tried to mirror this role off of what a director of institutional research would do on a campus. And so I'm doing a lot of membership tracking in different ways, whether that is graduation rates, academic information, even some of the historical information as we can see our membership over time, or even some very basic things like the fraternity instituted a policy in a certain year and what happened then, trying to figure out impact and that kind of level. I'll give you a quick fun one. As some people are familiar, the fraternity in the early aughts instituted the 8-week maximum new member period. What a lot of people I don't think realized is prior to that policy going in place in the governing documents of the fraternity, the fraternity's first year initiation rate was hovering around 75%. But as soon as we instituted that policy, an immediate effect you saw from that point on to current, the fraternity's new member retention in the first year initiation rate has never dropped beneath 80%. And so it's really encouraging to see that some of the choices and the decision we're making in hindsight are having a really positive effect on the organization. And I feel really proud to be able to show that information and to provide that through an analytics lens.
That's awesome. And I understand that you're doing some work currently with retention numbers in sort of the current state of fraternity. What have you gathered from some of that work, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think the first thing to recognize is just why this work is important. For most of our colleges, the two main factors that university administrators at the highest levels are constantly considering are first-year retention rate and 6-year graduation rate. And so a first-year retention rate on a college campus would be how many people enroll in our university and are here at the second year. So they show up for classes and are enrolled in year 2. And the 6-year graduation rate is how many people are at our first-year students, full-time students seeking a degree 6 years later. From a cohort perspective, of that 6-year window, how many of those people have graduated from that first-year class? And so what you'll see a lot in dialogue in higher ed is how do you increase those numbers? How do you affect those numbers? Policy changes, the effect of a residential campus. For my fellow Ohioans out there, there was a bit of a back and forth about 5 years ago about even tying federal funding to a graduation rate, which would make some universities a little nervous. And so it's important to recognize that this information isn't just important to us. In fact, it's really more important to our higher ed partners. And that's why we need to find that important. And so over the last 2 years, I've really dug into understanding historically our membership from the men who have pledged our organization and those who were initiated. That's what we mirror our first year retention rate off of. And then also of those men who were initiated in 1 year, how many of them went on to graduate in 6 years? And so we call that our 6-year retention rate. And so some figures for you, as of the 2018-2019 year, our first year retention rate was around 89%. And that includes the almost 3,200 men who pledge the organization. So we should feel really proud of that 9 out of 10 men who join our organization are being initiated and are sticking around. So I'm very proud of that. And then at the 6-year window from 2013, fall 13 through spring of 19, 74% of those men who have joined the organization in that period of time, that's over 21,000 men who have pledged the organization from 2013 to 2019, have gone on to either be currently active in good standing or alumni members. And 74%, I know some people might think that that's a rather low number, or it's certainly lower than 88%. But it's also important to keep that in perspective of our campus peers, specifically our regional public institutions, where you'd see a 6-year graduation rate hover between 65% to 45%. And so what this tells us is that the value of a fraternity and the value of Delta Tau Delta is directly impacting the university. And if we can say that the fraternity is leading young men, particularly, to stay and to graduate, then that helps us make the argument of why a fraternity matters here. I want to give you a couple of good examples, and I want to shout out some chapters here. I did a little bit of research, and I got my notes. When I look at the 6-year retention rate versus our campus rate, our group at Morehead State University, Zeta Zeta chapter, has a 6-year retention rate at 85%, compared to the university 6-year graduation rate at 43%. They are 42 percentage points higher than the campus graduation rate. And that's a very significant number. What that says to me is that the experience our men are providing down in Morehead, Kentucky, is really making the collegiate experience valuable, and it's helping men graduate, and it's giving men leadership opportunities, and helping young men. Particularly, I identify this as myself, a first generation student. There's some men I know at Morehead State who are also first generation student, and the more first generation students that the fraternity can help graduate, I think that just helps add to the fabric of the fraternity. Some macro level information: we have 73 chapters that we've looked at that are above the 6-year graduation rate on their campus. And I just, again, want to give a couple shout outs to some chapters and throw out some numbers here. Our men at Epsilon chapter at Albion College are 34% higher. Epsilon Eta at Texas A&M Commerce are 32% above the campus average. Iota Theta at Kennesaw State, I see Cody in the comments, your guys are 32% percentage points above the campus graduation rate. E-Phi at Southeastern Louisiana, 29% higher. They're overachievers down there in Hammond. Our guys at Theta Xi, Eastern Michigan University, are 26% higher. Gamma Kappa at University of Missouri, also 26% above the campus average. And Delta Gamma at the University of South Dakota are 25% higher. So this really says to me that we have a lot of groups that are really adding value to sticking around in college and engaging in the collegiate experience. And it makes me really proud that we can say, and all of us as members can say, that we have a small piece in helping young men graduate from college.
That's awesome. Awesome. And great to hear that so many chapters are paving the way with effective recruitment, retention, and that we've been able to catalog that data. So I know a lot of this comes to you from on right now, or you have out there that you're especially excited about that are in the works right now.
Yeah, so a couple projects that we're really excited about. We have a couple surveys coming out this spring. Actually, or the spring, it's almost summer now. over the next 6 weeks, 2 of our surveys are a volunteer satisfaction survey, and we're also having a communication survey go out. This is the 2nd year that we've done the volunteer satisfaction survey, and so what that means for us is we're able to survey our volunteers and understand what they perceive their needs are, and are they feeling appreciated, and is the support that the fraternity is providing to them helping them be better volunteers for members. We're also asking some questions around even just their experience, like how far are you traveling to volunteer, and really helping us get a really good picture of the volunteer experience. We do take this information seriously. We do put things into action. Just want to provide an example from last year's results. We were able to look at it and decided that we really need to overhaul our onboarding process. And so Bentley and the volunteer task force have gone through and spent the last year thinking about how onboarding can be different to provide more support for men, as they told us that that's really an area that they felt like they were being underserved. The communication survey, this is one that we've done for a few years now. And again, we take this feedback very seriously. it's really focused on the publications of the fraternity and how the fraternity communicates with its members. So there are items about the rainbow and the Delt Digest and how we engage in social media. What's really interesting there is being able to see ways in which we can identify demographic changes and differences in terms of preferences of communication. And a really good example of what we've started doing there is we've started to use Instagram as a tool to connect with undergraduate members, as we're seeing an uptick in the use of Instagram, the prevalence of the fraternity on it, and also people just engaging with our content there. And so as opposed to just posting graphics and things on Instagram, I'm sure what some students have seen over the last year or so is the division conference pick the color t-shirt poll. Fun fact, I was actually talking about this with Justin yesterday. The most engaged content on our Instagram was a piece about a Delt basketball jersey. And so being able to not only have one-way communication through Instagram, but also considering how can we have that be a two-way street and hear from students through that platform, in addition to just providing communication. So those two surveys will be coming out over the next 6 weeks. Everyone should make sure to pay attention to those, as those will be coming through email and Instagram. And so people can take those, and we take all feedback seriously.
So from what I gather from that, a Delta Tau Delta official TikTok will be coming down the line, right?
Yeah. You need to check with Justin Piles on that one. He would be the lead on any TikTok programs. I'm sure Jack Creeman would love to do some dances in his current at-home office, and I'm sure his boys would love to be part of that.
That's justin.piles@delts.org for all that are interested. Ken, no, this has been great, but I can't let you go until we talk at least a little bit about everyone's favorite part of the year, the FAR. Tell me, what can you tell me at this time about the Fraternity Awards and Accreditation Report?
Yeah, so it's as everyone knows, it's a very interesting time. The FAR certainly is going to be affected this year. And so I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing for 2020 and then talk a little bit more about just the FAR in general. So we have had students and we've had volunteers reach out and say, hey, what's going on this year when 2020, given everything that's happened in 2020 with the FAR. And so I want to share with everyone that the fraternity is really considering options in terms of what we can do to both understand, be compassionate about the student experience, and also recognize the really good work of chapters and find a way to even today recognize when chapters are going above and beyond in their programming and their policies and their experiences. And so the division presidents are meeting tonight to talk about what FAR 2020 will look like. I doubt we will have a decision tonight, but tonight will be the starting point of the conversation. And I'm hoping that at least before the semester starts, probably closer towards the end of July, the fraternity will have an official statement and also directions and support documents on how we're going to handle both accreditation and awards during this 2020 year. So some things I think some people like to talk about the FAR is just general awards, but I think what some people miss when talking about the FAR is really just the time investment, both between staff, arts chapter, members, volunteers that's involved in the FAR. I know some students always tell me like, oh man, I've been working on this for like 4 days. The FAR is so crazy, and it's November 1st. But I think what some people miss is that it's really a year-round project for us. We're working on FAR 2021. We've been working on FAR 2021 for a couple months now, just thinking through how to design rubric and award items that reflect the current realities of both our campus experiences and what the fraternity is moving forward with support programs. Accreditation items we're continuing to evaluate. I'm sure some people have realized over the last couple of years we changed the accreditation items and that process is a little bit different. And so for us, it's a constant evaluation and trying to balance really between two thoughts. One, how do we recognize what's happening at our campus level and our collegiate experiences to create a process of evaluation that's fair, that's equitable, and that helps give really good feedback to students about their current operations and how to move. And then the second side of it is how do we create a process, thinking about it longitudinally over time, that we can make small adjustments here and there that will help push the chapters and push the organization to improve, that we're not just a stagnant rubric, but as we see overwhelming amounts of our groups achieve at level A, we're now going to ask them to achieve at level B. And we're just going to slide the rubric a little bit, thus creating a constant feedback loop, but also a constant way for us to challenge groups to improve, to challenge groups to be relevant and positive impact on their campus. Some other things I think a lot of people miss is really just the time that we have volunteers involved in this process. The Arts Chapter reviews the accreditation and awards items annually. They vote on them annually, and they really are invested in making sure that this process is one that students would want to be engaged in. The Undergraduate Council also is engaged in that process, and I really take their feedback seriously. And Vince, as a former member of the UGC, I remember having conversations with you about the FAR and what we should do and what we shouldn't do. But we also have volunteer graders that help evaluate the FAR. This year we had 8 graders. They worked remotely, which was the first year that we had them all work remotely. Typically we bring them into Fishers and have them grade over the course of a weekend. But this year we tried to do something a little bit different. And over the course of 2 weeks, we had 8 graders review 8 sections of the FAR. Our graders are responsible for grading 50% of the FAR. So 50% of it is graded by these volunteers who go through every single item, every single thing that chapters submit, and provide a score based on the rubric. And then 50% of it is graded by the central office. And those are just the data-centric things like GPA, service hours, really things that are objective. But the more subjective pieces, we leave entirely to volunteers to provide those scores. And so those men are often unheralded. We typically keep their identity anonymous. But they are the backbone of this work every single year. So I always appreciate the volunteers and what they do in terms of getting the FAR off the ground.
Awesome. Well, Ken, I appreciate you taking time this morning to connect, to talk about the assessment and the good work that you're helping do here with the fraternity. So appreciate it, and appreciate all of your support for both the fraternity and the Educational Foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to be here, happy to support. Foundation has done quite a bit for me, and I'm proud to call myself a Delt and to be a part of this great day.
Awesome. That's Ken Tubbs. We'll send you out, and we will focus on transitioning to our next break in the action. We'll be back on at 10 a.m. and keep tuned in, because at 11:30 we'll have International President Steve Paquette on. Appreciate all the comments coming through, and unfortunately, Delt Nation, looks like Justin Piles is not on board with the TikTok idea. But we are on the doorstep of passing $30,000, and as you see below, you can make your gift now at www.deltsgive.org. It is One Day, One Delt, the 3rd annual Delt Day of Giving. We're working hard to provide as many resources for students across the globe right now, especially with all things COVID, with our Delts Helping Delts Fund, our health and wellness resources. There has never been a more crucial time to make sure our brothers are supported across the world. So thank you all for those that have already given, and for those that will continue to give throughout the day. Signing off for now, this is Vince Russo here from the home office and the Delta Tau Delta Educational Foundation.